Okay, part 4. Here we go. I'm going to continue to add on to where I was at part 3, and let's see how things progress. So I was talking about a lady who started a face painting business, and ultimately, it doesn't have to be huge or difficult. She's looking at doing something fun and creative. And what I was trying to say before, and I'm just going to finish off on this point, is being organized, knowing where you stand is one of the mistakes that I made is that I felt that I had this thing kind of figured out. So my business, when I started my business, I was like, okay, one of the other things I wanted to do was own real estate and have multiple properties. And so my first property that I had, I said, well, I got to cut my expenses. So in doing so, I had a really good friend of mine. His name's Gabriel Romo. Throwing him on this, and he had just purchased a home and asked me, hey, if I wanted to split some expenses with him, and I said, sure, I'll go ahead and split some expenses with you. So I moved in with him, knowing that I wanted to transform my property into a rental vehicle. That and my mortgage was higher than my bills were going to be. And so that was actually a good thing that I did. The bad thing that I did was that I didn't really create a budget. I just assumed in my egocentric my world that, hey, I could continue to live off of my expenses, and I had plenty of money in the bank, and even though I didn't have a job, I was saving money, I could continue my same lifestyle as before. This is where I failed, because not only was I in debt, I chose not to pay off my debt, and I basically just kept on living and spending my own money. And while my businesses were doing what they were doing, they weren't generating the kind of revenue that it would take to actually not only replace my previous salary, but also to pay off the debt that I had. And I just kept on spending, and I had felt that, eventually it was going to come. That was my thought process. Eventually, I will just make it, and then I'll just make it up, and I'll get caught up on the back end. Very dumb. Very dumb. After a couple years of doing that, what it did do is in 2014, I woke up with the reality at the beginning of 2014. The end of 2013 was an immensely challenging year. Even though business-wise we were doing well, I came to the realization that I had to break up the company. And I wasn't doing any construction at this point. It was basically just full-on AV, because I didn't want the liability of construction. And we had gotten to the point where, and I had a business partner at the time, and we'd gotten to the point where we were doing senior living facilities and apartments, and even then I still wasn't generating the type of revenue, and nor was he, to justify us being partners, because essentially that's all the profits were going to him and I, just to pay our living expenses. So that wasn't good. So we had I had to make the business decision and the personal decision to break up the company. So I broke up the company, and we still had contracts that we had to fill in the beginning of 2014. And again, as a result of my books not being in order, it was one of the largest stress points, because not only did I not have any money, I didn't know where my paycheck was coming in, even though I had some money. I was in the middle of splitting up a company, and I was working on it full time, and my books were a hot freaking mess. And it took me a very, very, very long time to get this thing organized. First quarter of 2014, me and Jesus had a good conversation, and that conversation was like, I had to look at myself in the face, and not just in the face, I literally sat in this very room. It's a little different now. I put in 3 whiteboards, and I wrote down a list of every one of my debts, bills, invoices, and exactly where I was at that point in time. And it was something I didn't want to do, because I knew I was painfully hurting. I knew I was struggling. I knew that I didn't know where my money was coming, and I was embarrassed just to even look at myself in the mirror. So I spent, and I'll never forget it, because this weekend, one of my best friends was having a pre-bachelor party, and a group of my buddies were all going down to the coast and going fishing. And I told them, I said, man, I can't go. I'm broke. And they were like, no, don't worry about it. We'll pay for it. I'm like, no, you don't get it. You can pay for it all day long, but but I'm freaking broke, man. And I was like, so when I get back, I'm still gonna have to deal with my broken, situation. So I chose not to go, and for all the right reasons. Because one, I mean, it was not going to solve my problem. It was just going to continue to do the one thing that I'd been doing for so long, which was avoiding it. Which was like, I'll make more money. I'll make more money. Well, shit, it wasn't about the money I was making. It was about how much I was actually putting in the bank. And then I'd gotten so far into debt that I was in bad shape. And at that point in time, I was close to $80,000 in debt. I had this property, and then I had another property, and my amount of rent that I was paying out, and if it wasn't going to rent, I mean, it was one constant thing after another. And all I knew that just in debt alone, just paying off my credit cards on a monthly, just to stay in my deal,